Howdy, y'all. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Scrim. I am super stoked to talk with our guest today, Mr. Jake Perlman. How you doing?
Good, Drew. How you doing, man?
Doing good. I'm, staying warm.
Yeah.
We got my scarf on.
It's all about the layers.
All about the layer. Even though we're inside, I still feel like it's appropriate to wear the layers.
We get to do it 2 weeks a year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So might as well suit up.
Right.
Well, man, it's great to have you in here. I was really excited when I reached out to you and you said, yeah, you wanted to be on the show. I'm a huge fan of KTX. That's like my go-to in the car. I'm a Spotify guy, but typically if I'm in the car, I'll try and land on KTX. And y'all just do incredible work with Studio 1A and everything like that. And I'm really excited to talk to you today about all that good stuff.
Well, thanks. Thanks for listening.
Absolutely. So we're going to get into it today about, what we're calling your it moment. And, but before we really get into that, I kind of wanted to help paint the picture for everybody. You are a part of an incredible station, with KTX specifically. Y'all host, I'm sure, more than just, 12 or 16 concerts a month. It sounds like you do almost 300 shows a year. Y'all do ACL Festival where you have your broadcast tent for 2 weeks. You do the live broadcast for South by Southwest. You're working with huge national artists, but also local artists alike. So, that variance is I'm sure extreme. But beyond all that, I know you kind of came up in the scene here in Austin in the late 90s. You're a musician. But even before that, what drew you into this world of production and music?
It was a combination of when my first band started when I was 13 or 14, and we were broke. And I had a little Radio Shack like DJ mixer, and we couldn't afford to go record anywhere. So I figured out how to get 3 mics into the mic inputs and then another sub mixer with some borrowed mics, and just started recording our own silly little band in high school.
And that was, I would assume that was before YouTube.
Oh, yeah. That was before the internet. That was before... my recording deck was actually an 8-track cassette, not an 8-track cassette like a Porta Studio, but literally an 8-track cartridge machine that had a record function on it.
So how do you even and the reason I kind of joke about YouTube is I feel like that's a really easy way now for somebody to gain interest into a hobby or learn a little bit. So how did you even know what to buy or look at? Or
well, the first, I kind of had a head start in my experience as being kind of an engineer doing duct tape and bubble gum janky setup stuff, because I wanted to be a DJ. I wanted to be on the radio. So my grandfather lent me the money to go to Radio Shack and get this little realistic mixer. And when I discovered that I could play drums, because my 2 good friends decided they wanted to start a band but needed a drummer, and I was like, well, I think I can record us. And so I just kind of figured out how to physically do it, how to get the signal path to the tape machine. And then it was just a matter of kind of refining it. I didn't have any EQ on that mixer. So I was just moving mics around and, crappy little $15 Radio Shack mics, trying to figure out where the good spot was.
Where the sounds are and all that.
And I had an enormous drum set at the time, just ridiculous. There was a Ludwig Vista Light kit, all concert toms, a 6-inch, 8-inch, 10, 12, 13, 15, 16, 18, and 2 kick drums. And 2 snares. Dang, and all I wanted to
13 years old, and you're...
actually, it was I was 15 by the time I got that kit.
Oh, okay.
But all I wanted to do was get around it as fast as I could every time I could. Yeah, it was terrible. I mean, it was like Phil Collins with, Tourette's syndrome or something.
Yeah, what inspired you for that size of kit? Was it?
It was this is how old I was. It was in the paper. There was a band from Kansas City called Shooting Star that I think got signed sometime in the early 70s or mid 70s, and it was the drummer for Shooting Star's Kit. It was probably the concert toms just sounded like, various different size coffee cans. Yeah, it was very much that. But and then when I started gigging, obviously I stripped it down because no one wants to schlep, all
after
those
one
drums.
show.
After one show,
you learn real quick,
and not being able to play double kick because I just, being a Stuart Copeland disciple, I couldn't get rid of the hi-hat. So, that was sort of my introduction to recording. And then from there, people knew I would DJ parties, that kids would have at school. I DJ'd our little school radio station that we had in our cafeteria, and I'd gotten in some trouble playing some music I probably shouldn't have played. So then I had to learn how to record it and turn it into the administration to get approval before it went.
So that was your pre-FAA, or was it
FCC?
FCC, yeah.
I had a really good friend, and she needed a recording for a piano recital to try to audition for a thing. So I started recording pianos when I was 15.
Were you kind of the only one at the time in sort of your group or scene or clique or class that was like diving into that? Were there others?
So. I remember there was a dude, and I wish I could remember his name. I remember the name of the band was White Lies. That was sort of this metal band, and he had a bunch of mics that he lent me for this first big recording project that I had with my band. And then we would do gigs, and the sound guys would just, be 1980s sound guys and just kind of jerky and kind of know it all. And I just kept saying to myself, like, there's got to be a better way. You don't have to. You don't have to be like this. And my bands were always kind of weird, like even through the 90s, were kind of very unusual musically, like kind of like a punk rock Primus, but without the what's the word I'm looking for? Without the musical talent. That's
the way I'm looking for. Yeah, that's fair. Okay, I think I'm hearing the noise.
None of us were great, but we had ambition and we were loud. And I was playing a lot of notes, and our bass player was very clever, and our guitarist would just kind of chug along. And then we would have sound people that would just not get it, and
sure.
Turn the vocals up real loud and put a bunch of reverb on it, and gate the snare drum, and
yeah. And that was kind of it sounds like you were sort of mixing both the technology engineering side of it, but also playing music. And I know, so when did you come, here to Austin?
I came, actually the band with the two guys that I started with, and this is sort of the crazy thing about my group of friends from the suburbs of Kansas City, all of us are still playing 40 years later.
Heck yeah.
And those two guys, we met up sort of, everyone in my neighborhood after they graduated high school went to Lawrence, Kansas, which is where University of Kansas is, with a great college radio station. It's a great music scene. This was 1990, 1991. Then Nirvana's Nevermind record came out.
Mm-hmm.
And every band in Kansas City, it seemed, got a record deal except for mine. Because we were still kind of weirdos and had a singer that was more of kind of a ranter than a traditional singer. And after that sort of burned out and our guitarist moved out of Kansas, I retired from music in 1992, and I moved to Naples, Florida to work for my dad. And Naples, Florida has a bit of a town now, but back then it was like 70 golf courses and a beach.
And that was it.
And then a bunch of rich Canadians and Germans, and then the middle-class people like myself that were there to serve them.
What were you doing there at the time?
So my dad had a Play It Again sports franchise.
Okay.
and this was the height of inline skating, rollerblades.
I remember, yeah, you were either a blader or a skater.
Yeah. So we sort of turned it into a skate shop, and I coached like a youth hockey team, a roller hockey team, and then my girlfriend at the time was still in Kansas. She moved to Florida. We got married. We're still married now. And then a couple of years into being in Florida, she wanted to go back to school, and I had already found like the indie record store in Naples, and found people to play in a band with. Just terrible band with terrible. Well, it wasn't terrible, but it was not the scene to try to start an indie rock band.
Right. Yeah, the audience might not quite be there.
No, they did not. As I've heard from other situations, like you can play, but people do not want to hear you. So we literally put Austin, Boston. I lived in New York previously, and I think Seattle into a hat and pulled Austin out, and then moved to Austin in 1995, 96. The first day we moved here, we drove here in a Ryder truck. Jesus Lizard was playing at Liberty Lunch.
Cool.
So we got
Rest in peace.
Yeah. We got our real estate person, our apartment locator, to drive us to Waterloo Records to buy tickets to go see Jesus Lizard at Liberty Lunch.
Was that this one over here on?
That was, they were on
Lamar?
6th and Lamar. And we went to Liberty Lunch and got blown away as usual by the Jesus Lizard, and just decided we're home.
That is awesome. Yeah. What luck.
Yeah. It was, I still remember that feeling, and every once in a while, even as much as this town's changed, like I still kind of get it, where I'm like, man, this, like, someone recently said this, I think it was a podcast that I was mixing, but someone said, like, it doesn't always feel great, but it always feels right. Like there's moments where it's just like, okay, this is why I'm dealing with Mopac or whatever,
Amen to that.
Yeah.
I feel that. So you come here in the 90s, and then it sounds like you start picking up music again, right? So
that was
you start your band Lions. Is that?
Well, I was in several different bands before Lions. I was in, the first real good band I was in was a band called Hot Wheels Jr. that then turned into the Action Is, because this was at the dawn of the internet, and I was like, we got to get our internet stuff together. So I put in Hot Wheels Jr., got us a website, and then Mattel within a couple of weeks found it, shut it, got a cease and desist order, like right after we had sent our CD stuff in to get pressed. So we had to change all the artwork. And then I left that band to join the Good Looks, not the current Good Looks, but the Good Looks. And then the Good Looks, we recorded a really great record, got to work with Bobby Keys, the sax player from the Rolling Stones, played on this record. And that
and he was also, Rolling Stones, Joe Cocker. He was like
John Lennon.
He was the sax player.
He told us he played sax for probably about 7 minutes, and we hung out for about 5 hours.
That is awesome.
There's a really funny story that I probably shouldn't get on tape about that night. But
this is going on the internet.
So then the Good Looks were on tour, and our van almost flipped. And half of the band quit, and then Matt Drenick and I decided that we should continue. And so we took all of the Good Looks gigs that were coming up and wrote a new set. I got my friend Austin Kallman to join. He knew this guy, Trevor, with a big bass rig and a ridiculous mustache. And we started Lions and wrote a new set in like 10 days and just started.
Hey, that's awesome. I feel like those moments happen, like the pressure, whatever, just like that's when those, things galvanize.
It was sort of like, how do we make our style, how do we make quick decisions but be kind of thoughtful about it at the same time?
And I saw, I think what I think is also really interesting about your story is, especially where you are now, which we're going to get into in your current role and position. But with all these bands, Lions and all the other Austin bands, I mean, you experience what it is to be a musician. You experienced what that interaction is with the engineer.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like you were constantly kind of taking notes of what was good, what was bad, or whatnot. But then I think also, you took part in the music scene, right? In the community. Mm-hmm. I was looking at the all the venues and clubs you played, which were pretty much all of them. Then I saw Trophies on there and I was like, oh man.
So we worked at Trophies.
Oh, okay.
Matt, the singer from Lions, was sort of the manager and the booking guy at Trophies. We were the ones that he mainly was the one that turned it into kind of a play. Like Spoon played there. Lions did a show with Ghostland Observatory there that was just nuts.
My band back in the day played there.
Oh yeah. So I mixed front of house. That was sort of the first steady front of house gig that I ever had.
Gotcha.
So we were the ones that took the PA and actually built like a front of house thing, because before it was sort of like a self mix on I think it was like a Yorkville 6-channel PA head thing.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I mean, it is it Steve, or who was the owner? Dave. Okay, yeah. And
Dave Sprower, R.I.P.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and he was one of those guys who, was crazy, but I feel like he gave everybody a shot. I mean, he gave us a shot.
Yeah.
Like it was tough booking. I'm sure it still is booking yourself.
Yeah. Well, especially with all of the consolidation that's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
But he was definitely one of those people who I felt like just was like, sure,
Right.
And then if he liked you, that he supported you and encouraged you. And it did help. It was a BYO liquor, right? Yeah.
It was just beer and 2 bottles of like terrible barefoot wine or something that had never been opened. The story always was that it was because it was so close to the school that you couldn't have a liquor license. But I think it was that Dave just didn't want to deal with the hassle.
That's fair. Yeah.
That was even into the early 2000s. They wouldn't even have a credit card machine.
That's wild.
They were still just cash for a long time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Of course, now it's Sea Boys.
Now it's Sea Boys, which is really so. Lions, I recorded with Matt. We recorded our first album upstairs.
Okay.
Before it was the swanky cocktail lounge is there now.
Right.
It was like a condemned. There were holes in the floor that would like you could. I'm not saying we did this.
Yeah. No.
But you could lower a bucket to the bar and have the bartender put things in it and then pull the bucket up into the room above. But it was just theoretical.
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
But Trophies was. I still say, like, if you solo the overheads on the first Lions record, you could probably hear like Cheeseburger in Paradise coming out from downstairs. Dave loved some Jimmy Buffett.
I love it. He had a good cheeseburger too there. I remember there was a good grill.
Towards the end, it wasn't really safe. But
well, hey, we all survived. We're here.
We're all
look
here.
At us now.
We're all here.
Well, that's awesome, man. So, I mean, what a journey just to get to Austin.
Yeah.
Drawing a name out of a hat.
Yeah.
Going on tour. It sounds like a major, scare and pivoting. And then you talk about Trophies was that moment when you really made the switch into like your first, live engineer gig. And like, was that really when you started taking note of, okay, this is actually a path I want to go down with live engineering?
Yeah, it was always for me. I mean, and I also play in the Barton Hills Choir, which is through my job. I kind of don't want to get us out of order, Drew, but I also worked at Affordable Sound.
Okay.
And that gig, they had me run their studio, but no one really wanted to. It was hard to get people to record there. We were in between a car alarm installer and where Trail of Dead had their studio.
Oh yeah, so a little loud on both sides.
I'd get some voiceover work or get a acoustic singer songwriter to come in there, and I'm like, okay, let's just wait till they finish the install, and maybe we'll get a little window, to do a take.
And then Trail of Dead comes
in, and but anyway, so I had been. I guess the easiest way to say it is I had been like doing little projects here and there. I'd produce a record with someone, or I worked with Frenchie at the Bubble for a long time, or not a long time. I worked for him for like a year. And I was kind of dipping my toes in engineering and producing
like
stuff. Yeah. And not so much live stuff, but it was when the trophies opportunity hit, because we were on the road so much with Lions. I was bar backing. I was, doing front of house whenever we got home, helping my wife with her interior design business. So just sort of piecemealing everything to try to make my nut, you know, which is not uncommon.
Yeah, that's the hustle.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that's a big part of, these conversations is to, maybe give opportunity for those who are interested in getting into it, that, it's a turns into a great career, which we're going to get into. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. But there's not a direct path, and you just kind of have to choose your own adventure. But I do find it really interesting. Most everybody who I've talked to, they all started out as musicians.
Yeah.
And then they really kind of at some point make that switch of saying, well, whether it's a financial decision of like, I get paid to do this more than I get paid to do that, or it's an opportunity decision of, I'm just getting asked more to do this than I am to do that. So it's just really interesting to hear your story, and it's another wild choose your own adventure.
Yeah. And I think for me, the engineering thing was like kind of my fallback position, my plan B. There were times like I was like a couple of tests away from being like a licensed stockbroker.
Dang.
And I'm a drummer, so I can only count to 4. But there were, a lot of instances where I was like going to go do this other thing because I was kind of aging out. I felt at one point with towards the end of Lions, where it was like, we're going to sleep in a Walmart parking lot for the second or third night in a row. And, we're going to show up at the next gig, and it's going to be that, you guys can play, but no one's here and no one wants to hear you, and this was like, we would play one show where it was a packed house, and, the dude from Sony was expensing a bunch of fun for us. And then the next show would be, don't even unpack the trailer.
Right.
Oh
yeah. It's just such swings.
Right. And I just felt like it at some point, it was about 7 years of like being on the road and piecing it together. And I was like, this just isn't, I would still, if someone offered me a bus tour right now,
yeah, exactly.
If I was playing,
the bus is nice. Yeah.
The bus is nice, but being the control freak that I can be sometimes, driving the van, 6 hours a day, and then, it just isn't worth it.
Right. Well, you just have to go on that journey.
Yeah.
And then
you have to, you don't know.
Right. And you don't know. And it helps, I think, make a decision ultimately.
Yep.
But, I think that leads us into what we're going to talk about today, right? Where the journey has led you. And what we're talking about today is Studio 1A, the Magic Factory.
The Magic Factory.
As they say. And, again, you have been the lead engineer there now. I wanted to kind of paint a little bit of the history of Studio 1A, because it's a long history, it's a big history, and it's a split history, right? So there was a split in 2013 when KUT and KTX, broke off, and they, KUT became news and KTX became the music program. KTX, kind of what we're talking about today with Studio 1A, right? It's an award-winning station, between the shows, your DJs, your podcasts. And it seems like Studio 1A is really the glue, right? It's sort of been there from the beginning during the KUT days, but now it's still here. It's really a glue that everybody kind of falls into. So, what is that scene like right now? And, is that a shared vision that everybody has to keep that ball rolling?
Boy, I hope so.
Yeah.
As far as I know, we have what 1A used to be, even back in the KUT days, so there was the old communications building, which is where 6A was, where KLRU shot Austin City Limits before they moved downtown to the Moody Center, the
Moody Theater. Yeah.
The Moody Theater. and they would do 2 or 3 live sessions a day, pretty much every day. And Cliff Hargrove eventually became sort of the head engineer or the chief engineer, which is sort of the position I'm in now. And prior to the pandemic, we were still doing 2 or 3 sessions a day, every day. To get, I think 2019, we did 350 sessions in 1A on top of all of our South by stuff and our Austin City Limits stuff. Then when the pandemic hit, Cliff had actually put in for his retirement before the pandemic. So, obviously during the pandemic, no one really knew what was going to happen. No one knew if bands were going to tour anymore, if it was, we were going to turn it into a switching room for, live streams or like what.
Right.
I literally took every cable I could find and every piece of gear and every hard drive that I could find in the building and laid it out on the floor of Studio 1A and tested every single cable, went through every hard drive, re-archived all of our stuff. Well, started to re-archive it. We're still working on it.
I'm sure that's there's a lot
of sessions. So now we're doing 1 or 2 sessions a week. Dieter Gott, who's our amazing booker and live music producer, and I would have these conversations where we're like, okay, how do we make this shine a little bit more? How do we make this sound as good? Like we would see an artist that we would get in 1A, and then a couple weeks later they'd be on KEXP or KCRW, and I'm like, why does that sound so much better? And it's like they're same kind of room, pretty much, same gear, and it's because they were doing everything in post. And I'm like, what if we did that? Because we had never, occasionally we had done that for like our CDs that we would put out for membership drives.
Gotcha.
But we would never have time. There was, it was me and Cliff. We were the only ones that were there.
Fuck it, we'll do it live.
Yeah,
that's
exactly. So we just sort of decided, like, let's go for like really great quality without worrying so much about the quantity, and then invite our concert club members to more shows, so we do more of them with an audience. Because my whole philosophy is I want to make this, like if you're a touring musician, you can remember like your 3 greatest monitor mixes that you had on stage. Like I remember the sound guy at the Mercury Lounge in New York, and there were 2 wedges on the drum riser. And I was like, this sounds like I'm wearing headphones listening to our record. And people that really take an interest in what you do. So I'm like, why don't we do that for people? Why don't we do a lot more advanced pre-production, start getting stage plots and input lists as early as we can, try to set it up exactly like they want it, which we could never do before the pandemic. And that combined with an audience and a dedicated front of house monitor person, really the goal was to try to make the artists feel as comfortable as possible, to try to get the best performance out of them, which then lets us have an easier time mixing it, and everything will end up sounding better. So the last 5 years or whatever it's been, that's kind of how we've been operating.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the hospitality side of it.
Yeah,
right.
And that's the thing that, like when I talk to prospective interns or young engineers, that's the thing that they don't really teach you in schools as much, is sort of the bedside manner of the whole thing. And, and I think that's what got me into engineering in the first place, was how terrible all these, front of house people were, monitor people were about dealing with bands. Like I've had sound guys like, why do you need another drum rug? It's like, why?
I'm just asking.
Why do you care?
Yeah.
I brought my own drum rug because it's got this thing on the front. Otherwise, I'm chasing my kick drum all over the stage.
Yeah, I've got a heavy foot. Don't judge me.
Yeah, I'm just as God made me. So, it's that sort of attitude about being there for the artists. Because a lot of times when we're dealing with national artists, they don't necessarily know what we do. They don't know what they're walking into. They don't know, they might have played another radio station that they played like in the broadcast booth, and the drummer was playing a cajon or bongos or something instead of a drum set. So us being able to we have a full back line at the studio, so they don't necessarily have to bring anything but their guitars and their sticks and cymbals, and we're ready to go.
Heck yeah. Well, you mentioned kind of Cliff Hargrove, who was obviously
my sensei,
a big and that kind of leads me to my next sort of question on sort of just the concept of this and how you kind of prepared yourself to jump into a role, because it started in 1974, and there's pretty much there's really only been 3 engineers prior to you. There was Walter Morgan and David Alvarez, who were sort of it seemed like they teamed up and did a lot of those.
Yeah, and David's still around.
David's still around.
Yeah, we chat all the time. He records all of the In Black America productions.
Gotcha.
With John Hanson.
Oh, that's what a historic career there.
Yeah.
So so it was them two, and then Cliff Hargrove, and I saw he started, I think, as a intern.
Yeah,
and then he worked his way up. So. Those are like, Supreme Court justice length terms.
Yeah.
And now it's you, right? So you're number 4 in this historic history.
I hadn't thought of it that way, Drew.
So now you're thinking like that. Like, what, you're ushering in this new era, especially post-COVID. So where has the old influenced the new?
Well, I will tell you, Cliff... and we still text every once in a while. Cliff was the answer to Wordle recently, so I texted him about that. He was so generous when I started. I got the job because my brother was an IT guy at UT, and just like searched for jobs occasionally to try to find other jobs at UT. And I was still piecemealing everything together and was kind of at the end of my rope. Like I did some work with AISD TV, doing audio for productions. And the producer of that department was retiring, so that was drying up. And I had a couple of other gigs that were drying up kind of all at once. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Going back to stockbroker, I guess.
Let me see if those ties are still around somewhere. But my brother he was like, dude, there's a job at KUT and it sounds like your resume. Like what they're asking for is you. And luckily, I know a lot of people applied for it. And luckily they picked me. And that was back when we also were running the Cactus Cafe, so there was that front of house stuff that was involved. And Cliff was so generous, and so he would just show me everything. And he had such I don't want to say odd way, but he had a very particular way of doing things that I think was born out of how many sessions we were doing. Because unlike now, if someone would say, hey, can we bring our own drum set? There might be a little bit of pushback because that means that we have to reset. If we're doing 3, we would do 1 in the morning with John Ailey, our dear departed morning host. That could be anything. It could have been, some opera singer, could be the cast of Grease, could be,
he was eclectic, right?
He was very eclectic. That was
yeah.
very appropriate. Yeah, the Trans-Siberian Klezmer Orchestra or whatever. And then, a rock band usually at 1 o'clock, and then we would have some local band come in at 3 usually. So moving the drum set once meant moving the drum set twice.
Right.
And
that's remiking and everything.
And so, and we would only have about a half hour to set up and sound check before we were live on the air. And then that board mix is what lived forever. So backing vocalist comes in hot and off key. That's
there.
Just how it is. So Cliff showed me a lot of like the quick and dirty ways to set templates and have presets kind of so that you're he also saved almost every session in our D show catalog. So if same band came in again with the same setup, you could pull that up. Or if there was, one singer less. And he was just very generous with how he set up and resetting and cleaning the studio every night and, cable management, just the stuff that I'd never, really focused on because we only had a half hour to change.
Right. And it was more churn and burn, but
yeah.
So it sounds like, you took a lot of the habits from the old, right? In terms of like, how they were, what their approach was, right? It wasn't all engineering. It was these other details.
Yeah. And then there was a lot that I learned because originally, in our new building, even, the wedges for the stage were run from the control room. They were not run from
in the room.
And even if we had an audience, so like if there's not an audience, typically we're not going to turn on the front of house system.
Gotcha.
So if there's an audience and the artist's up there like, hey, could I get a little more vocal in the monitor or whatever? And they're looking at me and I'm like, actually it's
that guy behind the window.
So that was so some and we would talk about it and he would be like, well, if there was only a way that we could do that and we just couldn't do it with the way the studio was wired. So when that dead time in the pandemic happened, I was like, okay, so let me figure out how to do this. Let me figure out how to create a couple of more auxes on the D show, just to do things a little more traditionally, or just ways that made more sense to me and to benefit the artists,
Heck yeah.
So now our monitors are run from the SQ5 that we have in the room. Almost all of our shows have audiences, so that uncomfortable thing of like, well, you're there, why can't you fix my monitor?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah, I know those look from the bands when they're looking at you and you're like, well, I wish I could help, but I'm actually not that guy.
Yeah, I literally I'm going to run in there and tell him you need more vocal.
Well, no, I think it's incredible, the history and how you've incorporated, where it's come from, where it is. And so now kind of talking a little bit more of the sort of creation of it, right? Creation of this product that is Studio 1A. You'd mentioned KEXP, and I think, I would personally put KUTX up there with, you've got KEXP, you've got Tiny Desk, and to me, then you've got KUTX, not necessarily in that particular order or whatever,
thanks.
But like in terms of those, the Studio 1A shows, those tapings, the quality. So, how do you, and you've talked a little bit about this, but kind of to go more into it, how do you become that caliber of output? Like, how do you saw KEXP, right? And you're like, okay, we need to do that. And obviously it triggered you to think, okay, post, but what does that actual team look like to like actually get to that caliber? I know you mentioned Deidre, you've got, Renee, you're also
Renee
an engineer.
Chavez is a huge part of it, and is a monster front of house engineer. And he and I have a lot of shared, values as far as how we like our artists to be treated. So he takes on probably the lion's share of, doing some of the pre-production and how we get there is preparation, and doing research. So we'll watch YouTube videos of bands that are coming in. I'll always listen to their records, to try to get an idea of like what I should be prepared for mix wise. So I try to get it as close as we can expect with everyone being in the same room. A lot of our success comes from when the artists show up, assuming that we get an accurate stage plot, which sometimes still, this was from 3 tours ago.
Yeah, who gave you that?
Who gave you that? 2 of those people aren't even in the band anymore. So assuming that we get that, and Renee is excellent at getting a hold of the tour manager or their front of house person or whoever's on the road with them, or if they're local, to get exactly sort of where things are, so that theoretically when they walk in, all they got to do is plug in and go. And then we can work on, obviously the monitor mixes change as things go. But that's a big part of it. And it goes back to what we were talking about before, that the more comfortable the artists are, the better performance you're going to get. So things are going to sound better. The artists, especially if they've been on the road and they're not totally burnt out, they might just be on fire, and they have that, muscle memory. Like all they got to do is just count the song off and they are locked in. And if we can catch an artist in that mode, then we can sort of have, kind of capture lightning in a bottle a little bit. Mm-hmm. So there's that. There's putting the mics in the right spot.
Right, knowing the room.
Knowing the room, knowing what our gear sounds like. I mean, of all of the cool mics, which we do have a few, which we can't use a whole lot given the live situation, that room is sort of like the best instrument that we have. So since the pandemic, I've been experimenting a lot with different room mics, and if a band is playing together and the drummer's not bashing cymbals too hard, or the guitarist doesn't decide to turn up all of a sudden, the sound of that mix kind of starts with like a stereo room mic at the back of the room, and then you just sort of fill in as you need to.
Build on top of that.
Yeah. I kind of take the approach of being kind of a documentary audio person in that room. Okay. Which isn't that far off. Like my idol was always Steve Albini, and the idea of like, what does some stranger sound guy, like if I show up, if I've driven 7 hours to get to some crummy bar in South Carolina and the sound guy tells me to retune my kick drum, and I'm like, that's funny because I've been playing this kick drum for 3 weeks and there's no problem with the kick drum.
Right.
But he knows better than I do, right? But he doesn't, and his thing should be make that kick drum sound right for the 17 people that are going to pay to come see it, or whatever it is, So my philosophy as an artist. Are we still on the air? Whoa.
All right, y'all. We're back. It wouldn't be a show Behind the Scrim if the power didn't go out to the whole building. That was planned.
A little too much scrim.
A little too much scrim, yeah.
Too much scrim.
They got a peek behind it. So you're watching this, you're probably like, what the fuck just went? Yeah, we lost power, but now we're back. But we were right in the middle of this creation of the KTX Studio 1A product. And you'd mentioned kind of your big influence was Steve Albini, sort of how he approached how he gave you ideas on approaching as an engineer, the room and how to really kind of take control. So talking a little bit more about what that day looks like in terms of creating this product. So you'd mentioned a lot of logistics go into the pre-production, right? So we're talking 4, 5, 10 hours at least per artist, probably,
somewhere there. Yeah.
Of just whether it's research, it's communication coordination. So you've already put, let's say 10 hours into it. Now you've got the actual day of show. Mm-hmm. So what is that kind of, run a show looking like?
Well, we have typically, and it depends on the band's setup, but typically we'll have the stage ready by the day of, unless we have another event in there. We do also podcast tapings in there. We have like luncheons occasionally, things like that. But assuming that we've got a straight shot from getting the stage set to when they arrive, the stage should be ready to go. Everything's tested. We've done a line check, 1-to-1 on everything to make sure it's hitting front of house and the recording deck at the same time. And then when the artist gets there, hopefully it's just fine tuning from that point. Some of the stumbling blocks can be things like if they haven't told us about a certain thing or want to use an in-ear monitor instead of a wedge. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, they just don't, the people that are on the road just know to come to the station sometimes. Right. Sometimes Deidre has been dealing with the record label or the radio promo people, or their actual management rather than their tour management. So they get there and then they see that we've got this awesome Steinway. And they're like, can we use the Steinway? And I'm like, absolutely, you can use the Steinway. And then things start to change. But now we have about an hour from the time they get there until the time we're live on the air or the show's supposed to start.
Right. And that's like, I mean, I think, and that's the intense part about live broadcast, right?
Right.
It's not like a live show at a venue where you have some wiggle room to push it or whatever. Right. Like this is, we can't have dead air.
As our captain, Matt Riley always says, there really aren't any music emergencies. Like you can always put on another record if you need to.
That's really interesting you say it because I think we'll talk probably the challenges of it, but I've having been fortunate to work alongside y'all, especially with like the live broadcast stuff for South by, inevitably something's going to pop up. And then, I know there's communication with the station like, yeah, just put another song. We got like 5 more minutes. So put a 5-minute song. Yeah. So I think that's another big piece that, people might not know is they're listening on the radio and just assuming, but like there's chaos, controlled chaos, right? Of like,
or not so controlled. Yeah. There's a lot of rumbling behind the scrim. Sometimes. Sometimes everything goes smoothly, but the key for me, seeing how Cliff worked, and I actually played a couple of times in the old 1A and in the new 1A before I started working at KUT. So I saw kind of what went into that, and assuming that everything goes smoothly, there's nothing to worry about. But if we aren't prepared, we kind of have to prepare for the things that you can't prepare for as much as possible. So we have systems that are set up where what's a good example? We have some problems with like RF hum with different amps. So we always make sure that our amps are kind of good to go, or we've got lifters available to just fix it.
Right.
We have instruments in house that if someone pops a string and we're live on the air, here's another guitar.
Yeah.
Just simple stuff like that, but it's not the stuff that would happen if you were, at the venue that night seeing them play. If the bass player pops a string, he may not have a backup.
Right.
So
he's down to 3 strings now.
He's down to 3 strings, which might be better. I'm kidding.
They only play 2 anyways.
Yeah. So it's a lot of our preparation is really just the experiences that we've had either at the station or the stuff that we've seen in other situations in our careers where we just know that we have to be ready. Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. You kind of build upon those experiences. Yeah. And I think my last thought too, with just sort of, this creation of it is, I'm really curious, what is your, what's kind of like your 9 to 5 routine, in terms of like the head engineer Studio 1A?
Well, it varies. My job actually also involves booking all the other studios, too. So I might be, engineering a podcast for an outside client one day, or doing that in the morning, or, helping mix the Texas Standard one morning, and then that afternoon having an artist in 1A. I always joke that my job description, at the end of the job descriptions at UT, it says, "and other duties as necessary," and that line is actually most of it's just sort of, whatever happens, finding replacement headphone pads for a reporter, or prepping something to go on air. Like if we've had, usually all of the deliverables that we have for Studio 1A sessions are for our multimedia team, who I haven't mentioned yet. And I think that Deborah and Michael Manassi and Lori Ann and Patricia and everyone else on the multimedia team, like that do all the video stuff, are doing a killer job with the resources that they have.
Cranking out a ton. And so they're doing all the videos you see online.
All the videos that you see online, but they're also covering all of the new stuff for KUT. So if, we have an ice storm, let's say, they're out taking pictures of that and then have to get back to the mothership to shoot a music video.
Right.
So,
well, and I guess, and that's kind of like where if I think of a news station, my reference is probably from like a TV show, and it's just like chaos, right? This 24-hour cycle of just, like it. But in your role, like, are things scheduled, or is it like rough blocks and then you just kind of go?
There are, so sessions obviously, either in our talk studio or in Studio 1A, are pretty hard scheduled.
And are those like weeks out, months out?
Usually weeks out. But it depends. Sometimes Deidre won't get actual confirmation from an artist until a couple of days before. Mm-hmm. We always kind of know when stuff is pending.
Gotcha.
But bigger artists definitely, I feel more and more people are using studios like ours and stations like us as promotional tools, just because there's not as much money to kind of grease the wheels of promotion as there used to be. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of a partnership that I feel like when an artist comes to 1A and we're working with them to try to make them look as good as possible, which makes us look as good as possible, which hopefully gets people to the show or sells more records or gets more people to listen to our station. It's all sort of a mutual benefit to everyone. But 9 to 5 can be, it can be 7 to 8 p.m.
9 to 5 is a loose.
9 to 5 is sort of, and then of course when we have events like whether it be South by or ACL Fest or whatever, that can be a much longer day.
Yeah, and I think we're going to come back to that at the end, just in terms of how do you mentally prepare for that? But we'll get into that. But I think that does lead to the challenges that arise in these settings, in these long days, long weeks, short notice. I know for y'all, y'all have experienced your share, just between COVID, right? Talking about like what the challenges those created, solutions came from that. I remember when the antenna was down, right? Granted that wasn't necessarily your challenge, but I know everybody's involved working around the clock, then just dealing with live broadcast challenges with that. So, what would you say is probably your biggest like, oh shit moment?
Oh, my biggest oh shit moment. I think the very first session where Cliff had me drive was with Judy Collins.
Okay.
And Judy was super nice and super sweet. And it was one of those, just like every once in a while we'll get a superstar artist that comes through, and inevitably the artists are, for the most part, super nice, super friendly, super courteous, kind of grateful that someone's still listening to them, and excited to be able to do live radio, because it's kind of an old-fashioned sort of thing, really, when you think about it. Before there were records, people were performing live on the radio. And we had the host microphone somehow get unplugged as Jody Denberg sat down to start the interview live on the air. Judy couldn't hear him. He couldn't hear himself in the headphones. It was just the room sound of the piano mics and Judy's mic on the air.
So like way over here.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there behind the board for the first time, like the very first time.
Just got hired, like
this. Actually, I think I sat with Cliff for a couple of months, just shadowing him.
Gotcha.
And then I was in charge of editing the John Ailey CDs together, which is a whole nother long story. So long story short, the stuff that you heard on Eclecticos from Studio 1A had already been edited. So the crazy stuff that would come out of everybody's mouths was already like vetted.
Right.
Not vetted, but like we had cut out the really crazy off-topic stuff. So the OG stuff, I don't know how you want to cut that together. But anyway, so Cliff just ran out there and like checked every patch, because,
Right. That's where you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, got to start somewhere, and eventually we got it back on. But it was just like literally just
the deafening silence of
just
the
sitting
pit in your stomach,
sitting there in your underwear in front of all of Austin and Judy Collins. You know, and that was my very first solo flight. So that was something.
It's good to get that one out of the way early.
Good to get that one out. We had a coffee pot blow a breaker during a South by show at the Four Seasons, which took all of our codecs off the air and killed our mixer.
Killed it.
Well, knocked it out, and then it took forever to get back up, like in the middle of a broadcast. So
right.
Yeah, that was a tough one. But for the most part, it's hard to separate sometimes in the moment, like little things seem so big. But then with a little bit of time and space and putting it in context, it's really not that big a deal.
So like when an oh shit moment happens, right? Mm-hmm. Like what's your kind of go-to approach, after learning through those moments, is like, do you keep that into yourself and work through the solution? Do you start bringing in certain people at a certain moment?
Well, usually, I mean, if it's a genuine, like we're live on the air and something ain't right, I don't have time to get anybody else. It's just sort of like,
you start going through your troubleshooting.
Going through troubleshooting like right away. And a lot of times there's contingencies so that if, like I said, like a bass player pops a string, we have a bass.
Right.
But a lot of times it's something that people wouldn't even notice.
I was going to say too, is like, when you make it through, like, does it seem like people notice, or like, do you kind of feel like they're clueless to what?
I think so. I mean, it's the old thing. Like I'll play mixes for the misses and be like, I think it's getting close. And she's like, this sounds badass. Right. I don't know what I'm like, the snare drum's got this thing. No, it doesn't. It's fine. And it's, having that perspective and sort of knowing how to put things in context like that, I think is really the difference between a more experienced engineer and a beginning one. Because I see a lot of our interns and prospective interns that really overanalyze everything that they do, and it stops them from like either finishing. And I mean, I'm not necessarily one to talk. I made a record during Hurricane Harvey that I'm still mixing. It's going to be a big hit. When I get that bass tone just right, it's going to really blow up.
I feel that. That's like I came from the studio world also. Yeah. Like that's when I first started, and I quickly got out because I was just like, I never know when it's done. So I'm going to move to live because it's over when the show's over.
That's right. When the last note rings out. And that's really one of the keys. Like when we hired Renee, and we just recently hired Reina Sevilla to be another engineer on the team, excuse me, who's great, is having deadlines so that it is finished.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like we have to turn this in to the multimedia team. Like we have 2 business days to mix our 1A sessions. So what that usually involves is either Renee or I mixing it, usually at home. Usually takes between 5 to 9 hours to mix 3 songs, depending on how much surgery we may or may not have to do.
Right.
But I try not to do a lot because you can't auto-tune a vocal when you've got an entire drum set behind it.
Yeah.
Behind that mic.
You have to work with what you got.
You have to work with what you have. Going back to what I was saying earlier, it's really sort of a documentarian kind of approach. If I'm making a record, it could be, an abstract painting or a sculpture. But if I've got video evidence of what these people look like when they're playing, I can't have them sound like they're at the bottom of a well or, in Carnegie Hall or whatever. It's, a 90 capacity room. So it's not
take the reverb down.
It's not fooling anybody. And it goes back to that Albini thing where it's like you hit a snare drum at a punk rock club it doesn't sound like you're at the Moody Center, you know?
Right.
So you want that to sound like it would sound in the environment in which you would normally hear it. And that's sort of the angle that I try to take. And I feel like Renee and Raina both are very much on that same page with me.
I think it definitely translates. Yeah. I mean, I've
Cool.
seen the progression. And like I said, like I put y'all up there with, I mean, y'all are the top three in my opinion. Right. And I think it just really is. And it's really cool to hear what all goes in, you know, to this product.
I mean, a lot of it is sort of like I kind of feel like we set the table and then the artist puts the food on it.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, and it's not up to us to, which also goes back to, I think why I got started is, you know, dudes, because they were always dudes, that felt like they should have a hand in whatever the band sounds like. When I want an engineer, unless otherwise, you know, I want an engineer to take a picture of what this band sounds like in that moment in time. I don't need to create some soundscape in outer space where, you know, unless it's appropriate for the band.
No, I mean, I think that's a great insight and approach to your process. Yeah. And makes total sense. So yeah, kind of then moving into that, you know, the sort of last area in terms of like the effect of what it is you create and, you know, when do you know that like you've done something, you know, good or special? Like, is it when you actually see the post product? Is it, you know, when maybe friends or family, you know, text you, oh dude, I was just listening to the radio, or like to you, what do you get? Like, when do you kind of get the satisfaction?
Well, sometimes it doesn't come.
Hey,
sometimes it's like it's due. And people, you know, I will say for the 10 plus years I've been at KUTX, I've gotten 5 or 6 mix notes.
Wow.
Because I think a lot of it is that I'm so much more critical about things than other people that are the end users are listening to it, right? They may not like the song. They may not like the singer's voice and think that the whole thing is, you know, crappy, but there's nothing that I can do about that.
Right.
You know? So when I get good feedback, I always sort of temper it with like, had I another day, maybe it could be, but that's sort of the trick, right? Is what's the phrase? Like the diminishing returns.
Sure.
Of like, okay, so if I work on this for another 3 days, is it going to be?
Is it going to get better?
10% better.
Right.
You know, I've worked with producers and mixers on my projects where like every mix I got after the first one got worse and worse and worse. They're like, dude, let's go back to the, you know,
let's go start square one again.
Yeah, let's start, you know, we were closer before.
Yeah.
And I feel like for 1A stuff, I get a sense of where I'm not hearing my hand in it anymore. That there's been a couple of mixes, like we did a really great session on Adrian Casada's first Bolero Psychedelicos project.
Oh, it's a great album. All this stuff is badass.
Yeah, he spent like a day with us with that band, and we ended up taping a thing that he ended up mixing, but it went on the Colbert Show from our studio, and like I felt like his permission to kind of do all of the tape slap stuff and kind of the, you know, a little bit of the distortion on vocals and things to make it vibe the same way that record vibes. And I love those records. So in those cases, I'm able to, because I feel like it's getting closer to what their vision is rather than just like, this is what 5 people sound like in the room. Right. So there was a time where I was working on that, and I think I got a couple of days on that one. And I was like, okay, this is, I mean, I no longer make the mistake of like A-Bing their 1A sessions with the record, because it never stacks up. And,
Right.
And I think I'm doing great. And I'm like, oh, I bet this is as good as the record. And I put the record and I'm like, oh my God, I'm not even close. But there have been certain projects where I'm like, okay, I feel like I really nailed that one. Like I knew what it was supposed to sound like. The band gave us what I thought they were going to give us, or that I hoped that they gave us. And then the final product is like the best that we could do.
Yeah.
And
So
I feel like that's a pretty significant amount of the time that happens.
that's awesome. So, it kind of sounds like it's a bit of balance between the performance itself, right? The delivery of the performance, but then, your attention and ability to massage it and mix it.
It's all what happens on the other side of the microphone,
right?
Before it gets behind the scrim.
Hey. Oh no, man. I mean, that's awesome to hear. So, I think to kind of, sort of bring it to a close with everything we've talked about today, from just, your journey starting out, all the, the touring late nights, the sleeping in a van, the 12-hour days, 15, 16-hour days of ACL and South by. I want to talk a little bit about the ethos of what it takes to, be in your particular position, but just the industry in general, right? So like, what is the driving force for you? Like, what would you say is kind of the one thing that's remained consistent throughout when you started to like where you are? Is it just persistence? Is it just happy, good vibes? Like, what's the...
Gosh, that's a good question. Deep.
Save it for last.
Now you're making me think. What I hope is that it's kind of a good hang. I feel like, I'll give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
Michael McDonald.
Yeah.
The pig. Michael McDonald came to 1A, and we got a package for him like a week before he arrived, which is a little unusual. Sometimes bands will have stuff sent if they know that they're coming, but
like a package of like
like
gear
a package.
or like
it was like a UPS package.
Oh, okay.
And he was with his tech, who is awesome and like really funny. And I was like, hey, this package came for y'all. And he was like, oh, good. And he opened it, and it was a pair of Sennheiser HD 280s.
Okay.
And I'm like, why? What, do you need these in the bus? And he's like, no, we did this session at another station and their headphones sucked. So we wanted to make sure we had a pair of headphones here. And I'm like, well, we have like stereo monitors set up because he was just playing, piano.
Right.
And I use that example because artists are used to not being taken care of sometimes. Even someone like Michael McDonald, who is a super rad dude. And I kind of can't believe like I got to, be in the same room as his voice. But I feel like being able to support artists, regardless of what happens with the product, the end product of what we do, it's sort of like running front of house, and like, yeah, you may have, not rung out the monitors exactly right and had a little bit of feedback, but if the band was badass and people had a great time, that's kind of all that,
that's a win.
That's a win. And then you go to the next town and do it the next night, So I feel like what I've always been interested is having an artist have a really good experience. For local bands or like, I hate to say baby bands, but that's sort of, bands that are starting out.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can create something, with like our Artist of the Month program at KUTX, where artists get kind of a free bit of promotion that they can use to either get gigs or better gigs, or this is what we sound like live. which they may not be able to get a pro shot thing on a limited budget.
Right.
I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, I think that does. I mean, what I'm taking away from that, and I think what other, the idea of other people to take away is that, what makes it worth it to you is just, that like experience of seeing an artist happy, of that vibe of,
right. And to be honest, like when I get a sound dialed in, whether I'm in the studio or when I'm remixing stuff, when that happens, that still gives me like, sometimes I almost started crying the other night mixing a thing, like I'll still get, the goosebump, the goosebump test is like, okay, that's when a mix is done.
Yeah.
Is when, and that may be a better indicator than when I don't hear like the mix moves that I'm making in the playback, then I know that it's like, okay, the artist is coming through this, and because it's always about the song and it's always about the performance. It's not about, this cool plugin that I'm using on it, right? I'm only using that plugin to get from point A to point B for that artist. And I feel like that's sort of the win for me, is when I'm like, okay, this is the best that I could do with the materials that were given to me. Hopefully this will reach an audience that appreciates what the artist is doing and not thinking about what I did.
Well, I think that's really special, man, because, I think, I'm sure KETX is super grateful for you. And I think all the bands who come through there, and who will come through there and they hear this. I mean, it's the fact that, the music is the passion for you. The music's the driving force, that's really special. And that translates. And that's also part of, this show, is to allow not only industry people, but just the casual listener to, readjust their maybe perception of the sound engineer. It's no longer the sulky guy in the corner smoking cigarettes from the 80s, right? It's a very, very passionate, very smart, very skill adaptive person, who is in this career and profession now. And that's also, I want to shed light on that for people too, that this, is a profession now. It's a career path. It's not traditional,
right?
Still not quite traditional, but, I think people can find success if they're persistent. And it sounds like for you found your success through just, really just, maintaining that passion of ultimately the music, and it's led you to where you are. So I think that's super awesome, man.
Yeah. And I never really thought that I would have, retirement set up for, doing this. That's
right. None of us thought that going into it. Yeah.
And, I just assumed it was a race against time between, my ears and,
till the day I die, man.
Till the day I die.
Yeah.
But, it's because I used to do this for free. I would go to people's practice spaces at Music Lab and, for a 6-pack and, pack of cigarettes, I might record 4 songs of your band.
Hey, that was a good deal.
That was a lot for me back then. But I feel like the passion for the music is kind of the reward in a way. If I can contribute to that in some little way, then it's a win.
That's awesome. Well, man, any kind of upcoming stuff that you're stoked about? I saw maybe there's like a studio revamp happening. Did I read something like that? Or
we're hoping we are. I don't know if I should say. I'm hoping at some point in the near future we are able to upgrade things in 1A. My dream is to be able to do traditional recording sessions in there. Which, because of our limited Pro Tools rig, which is stuck in a time warp about 25 years ago, we're not able to really overdub. So I'm hoping that with our next upgrade, we can start recording bands and actually like put out singles or have like KUTX only exclusive sessions with bands.
Badass, yeah.
South by's coming up, of course.
Yep.
We've got the KUT Festival, which is happening the first weekend in May.
Oh, I read about that. That's new.
It's new. It's going to be a lot. But I'm excited about that. Trying to think of anything else that's coming. It's mostly South by and
yeah. I mean, those are big. Those are back to back pretty much. I mean, like that's, I think people, you know, they see like, oh, those are months away. And it's like months away means it's weeks away.
Yeah. And
you know,
I don't know when this will go up, but you know, South by this year, it's funny. I had some buddies of mine, a great band from Kansas City called Shiner, was just in town last week. And they were like, so South by is like just shorter this year, right? And I'm like, actually, it's longer. You know?
Yeah, technically.
It's a full week of music. Instead of 3 days.
Right.
And they, you know, even in Kansas City, they're like, oh, there's only 3 days of music. And I'm like, no, there used to be.
Yeah.
So that's going to be our usual heavy lift, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're ready for it. We'll be ready for it.
Yeah, I think everyone's kind of figuring this year out a little bit because it's just different.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, man. Well, Jake, thank you again. What a awesome story.
My pleasure.
And also, you know, so stoked for your continued success and what y'all are doing there.
Thanks.
You know, I hope people walk away today from, you know, hearing about what goes on to it. Just maybe take a little bit more appreciation when they're listening. And but your whole team, y'all do great things over there. So continue rocking and rolling, man. I know the Austin scene's grateful for y'all, the musicians, everybody. So,
well, I'm happy to do it. Happy to have a home where I can do it.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Well, right on. Well, y'all, thank you again for tuning in. Again, we got Jake Perlman, head engineer for Studio 1A. Check them out online. They got all their videos up, and we'll catch you on the next one.